I'm happy to be here with you all this evening. I thank very much Liz and the Flame of Love for the UK, for the invitation. I was sharing with Liz and some of you that I have been invited to a few different retreats of the Flame of Love in different parts of the world, and I am so happy that Our Lady has taken into consideration inviting all of us here, because it's all her plan. So I'm going to start with a story of an encounter with God that has changed my life. I was born in Colombia in South America, up in the Andes Mountains, in a coffee grower's town, in a Catholic family. I'm the number 6 of 10 children. And when I was 14 years old, they sent me to Bogota, the capital of Colombia, a big city. And those were the 1960s. And Colombia had many American youngsters that were running away from the Vietnam War. And many of them were hippies. And they brought into Colombia the hallucinating drugs and the rock and roll and the Eastern pagan philosophies, Hinduism, Buddhism, Shintoism, and all of the isms that lead you to the abyss, because that's what happened to me. And I very soon joined all their culture, because the magic, the divination, the astrologies, numerologies came along with it, and I lost my Catholic faith. So when I was 20 years old, I got married in Bogota and moved to Germany, to Hamburg, and there I lived 7 years. I went to the University of Hamburg and became an actor and a musical composer. And my 2 sons were born in Hamburg, and after those 7 years I moved to Los Angeles, California. For over 20 years I worked in the entertainment industry in Los Angeles, and since I left my hometown at age 14, I lived my life completely away from God and focused only on money, pleasure, fame, life in the fast lane, as they call it. And the only person that would tell me about God was my mother. She used to visit with me in California every 2 or 3 years, and she will always tell me, I am not very impressed with your money or your success. I am very concerned about your soul. If you die living the type of life that you are living, you are going to have a lot of problems with God. I loved my mother dearly, but I didn't believe in her religion, so I didn't pay attention to her counseling. But in year 1997, everything changed. I went to Colombia during Christmas of that year, and that Christmas was a pretty sad Christmas in the family, because within the 4 years prior to that Christmas, we lost 5 people in the family, one after another. First, my wife died to cancer. Then my younger brother died in an accident in the sea. Then my father passed away. A few months later, another brother of mine committed suicide in Bogota. And not long after that, my mother passed away. So that Christmas, we were 4 sisters and me left. My sisters were practicing Catholics, and they didn't know that I didn't practice my Catholic faith. The only one that knew was my mother, but she never told them. The only thing she would tell them when she would be back from California from visiting with me, she would tell them, pray a lot for your brother, but she would never tell them why. So thinking that I was still a Catholic, they invited me to church to pray the Divine Infant's Christmas Novena, which is a very old Catholic tradition in Colombia. So I went to church just to please them. But I didn't tell them that I haven't been in a Catholic church for 33 years. So I went to church and the priest introduced the novena saying, when you pray this novena with devotion, the baby Jesus will grant you a grace. I didn't know what grace was. At that time, I didn't even remember Jesus was God. You know, I was so lost in so many things. But I thought, maybe I can get something out of this. So the priest asked us to place our intentions mentally. So I asked the baby Jesus to change my life. You probably imagine the change of life I wanted was something totally materialistic. But the baby Jesus changed my life at Christmas. His way, in a very painful way, as you're going to hear, but I wouldn't change it for the world today. The novena ends on the 24th of December at midnight mass. And Christmas Day, I decided to spend the night at a coffee ranch plantation of one of my uncles. And at midnight, as I was driving through the gate of the ranch, 6 guerrillas with machine guns jumped out of the woods and kidnapped me. They tied my hands in the back, put a hood over my head, and took me prisoner to the jungle. In the jungle, they put me away in a cave. The cave was filled with bats and all kinds of insects of the jungle, a horrible place. Altogether, I was kidnapped for 6 months. The first 15 days, they kept me in that cave. On the day 15, another group of guerrillas arrived, and they asked me for a pretty large sum of money, and told me that if I refused to pay it, they would kill all of my family. Also, that I had been sentenced to death, that as soon as I paid the ransom, I was going to be executed. So they tied me up again, put the hood back on my head, and put me back in the cave. So that night was the night that I had my experience with God. I was there in the cave, totally broken as a human being. I had no hope of making it out alive from that jungle. All my family were in danger of getting killed. Money had been the most important thing in my life up until that night, and they were going to steal it all. So I couldn't be in a worse situation. And I was perfectly awake and conscious. I was 47 years old that night, only that I had a hood over my head in a pretty dark cave. And all of a sudden, I entered into an ecstasy. At that moment, I had no idea what an ecstasy was. I'll find that out later. I thought I was dying, because in the ecstasies, I appeared at age 3 in the backyard of the house where I was born. I was on a tricycle with a stick in my hand, going through the gardens, hitting the plants and the flowers. And I could hear a maid of the house telling me not to do that. I was totally petrified. I was in panic because I didn't know what was happening to me, but I couldn't get off the ecstasy. And I continue on reliving my life little by little. By the time I was going to age 10 or 11, I began to go through the most excruciating pain, the pain of my conscience. For 33 years I lived in mortal sin away from God, and I had lost my fear of God, and I had my conscience sleeping. So now my conscience began to wake up, and the fear of God came back into my heart. I could perfectly see the sense of sin. I could see the consequences of sin, how much I had offended God, how much I had hurt so many people, how much I had placed my soul in so much danger. And as time went by, things got worse and worse because sins were graver and graver, and the pain was more and more intense. I think I went through my whole life. As I told you, I was 47 years old that night. This first part that if I will tell you in details what that was, I keep you here for years. This is, we can call it an illumination of conscience. This is what it was. Then something more mysterious happened. I appeared face down against the grass, on top of a pretty high mountain, in a silence that I can only call it a perfect silence, a silence I have never experienced in my life. When I looked ahead of me in the distance, far away, I could see another mountain even higher, and the top of the mountain was covered with fog, and the fog began to fade away slowly, and the most extraordinary city of light appeared on that mountain. My soul knew I had to have been there and didn't make it, so I was terribly worried, and I looked to see how I can get there, but I noticed the two mountains were not connected, so that worried me even more. And at that moment, I began to hear the sound of big waters approaching me. I could not see them, but I could hear them. And after a while, they turned into many, many voices. Voices in perfect harmony, absolutely precious. And then they turned into one voice. And that voice was coming from everywhere. Though I have been away from God for so long, and I worship so many false gods, when I heard the voice, I knew it was God's voice. But since I have had my illumination of conscience, I knew the terrible state of sin my soul was in. So I couldn't bear with the voice, because the voice was absolute, perfect love, and it was burning me. I was empty of love. And the Lord held me there in His compassion, and He spoke to me at length. He began telling me about the church. He told me, the Catholic Church is my church. My people, a chosen people, a people set apart, a predestined people, my army. I chose you to be a Catholic from the womb of your mother, and you deserted it. I cannot tell you what I felt, but the Lord was not accusing me. He was perfect love. But still, I was accusing myself. And he spoke about the mission of the church. And this part of the church is so long, I wouldn't be able to share it with you in this short time. But he spoke about priesthood. And he said, among human beings on earth, the most powerful person against the forces of evil is a holy priest. He said, a holy priest can make hell tremble. Then he spoke about the consecrated religious and marriage. And he said, when the consecrated religious and marriage is holy, they are torches of light in this world of darkness. And then he spoke about the sacrament of confession. And he compared it with an exorcism. He told me, with this sacrament, he went all the way to original sin. And then he went to the conversation that Moses had with the burning bush, when God revealed his name to him. And then he spoke about the building of self-love and all of this in order to take me to confession and to show me how transcendental and important confession was. And the reason why, one of the first things that Jesus did when he resurrected was to confirm his true presence in the Eucharist with the disciples of Emmaus. And then to establish confession when he appeared to the apostles for the first time. Then he said that once the priest gives us the absolution, we are totally detached and free from the devil, because when we are in mortal sin, and we stay long enough in mortal sin, a demon joins that sin. And if we continue in mortal sin, more demons join that sin every day. We end up with a legion. And only the sacrament of confession, with a true act of contrition, can free us from the devil. Then he spoke about the Eucharist, and he told me, the Eucharist is the greatest gift that God Almighty has given to all of humanity. And he showed me a priest in the sacristy preparing to celebrate Mass. And he ran me through every prayer of the liturgical vestments. And he told me, right in the sacristy, the biggest spiritual battle begins, because the Mass is the biggest threat against Satan. And when the priest walks out of the sacristy, ready to celebrate Mass, and he bends down towards the altar and kisses the altar, a big light descends from heaven and covers a large territory of people, not only Catholics, people, many people. And during the celebration of the Mass, amazing miracles take place, because all the works of Satan stopped. And he showed me how when we are at Mass and we are well prepared for communion, many people are dying around the world at that very moment, and many in danger of condemnation. When we come to take the communion, Jesus rescues the soul with our communion. And so he said to me, the biggest gift that we take as Catholics before his tribunal, when we die, is the souls that we rescue through our communion. Then he gave me a long catechesis about Eucharistic adoration. And he took it from Gethsemane, when he is sweating blood in Gethsemane, and the three apostles that he trusts are giving him company, or trying to give him company. And he compared adoration to the Blessed Sacrament to Gethsemane. And he went on and on. All of these I'm giving you as briefings of little pieces, because it would be impossible to give you everything. So then he spoke about the 10 Commandments and the 7 capital sins. He said the 7 capital sins are 7 legions of demons that combat the 10 Commandments. And he showed me 3 capital sins that were prominent in my life and that were the biggest fight of my life until I died. And then I appeared in a lake with the water up to my waist. And in front of the lake, there was a big rock. And on top of the rock on the right side, I could see the head of a man looking sideways. At first, I didn't know who he was. So I looked down towards the water again, and I saw a floating fog. When I looked at it closely, I realized it wasn't fog. It was hundreds of demons, the demons of my mortal sins of 33 years, legions. And my soul knew them all. I could never describe to you the absolute horror of that moment. They were like germs, they were like bundles. And the Lord took me to a passage of the scriptures where Jesus is passing by a cemetery at the Gerasenes territory with his disciples and apostles, and there was a possessed man running through the tombs. And he came running towards Jesus, complaining to him why he had to come. And then Jesus asked him for his name, and he said, Legion, because we are many. And the scriptures say that there were thousands of them. And then the Lord explained to me how the spirits do not occupy a space, because they don't live in time or space. So in one person, many demons can be. It's like germs. And that's how he showed me what I had. Towards the left of the lake, I could see this cloud of demons falling into an abyss. And I could perfectly see the abyss from the lake. I could see how deep down my soul had fallen because of sin, because of my sinful life. And I could see there were so many levels of condemnation. Then the only light that was there was the head of that man that was on top of the rock. So I looked back at him, and I realized he was my guardian angel. And he was not communicating to me with a voice like the Lord did. He was communicating to my heart. Something I cannot explain, but it was perfect. And he showed me on the right side of the lake the lowest part of purgatory. On the left side, where I had the experience of the demons and the abyss, everything was a terrifying darkness and all hatred, and it was horrible. On the right side, where the lowest part of purgatory, was a different type of darkness, but darkness anyways. But there was only love. But there was so much suffering. But it was a suffering filled with love. So to me, and I know it may sound absurd to many people, but when I looked towards purgatory, I felt relief, because I was getting away from hatred and the darkness of hell and going into this state where, though it was the lowest of purgatory, it was in an ascending mode. It was ascending, and it was love, but it was so painful, so painful. And they all knew me, though I didn't know them. But you could tell they all knew me and knew what was happening to me. I didn't know what was happening to me. But the angel took me to the town where I was born. And I appeared, excuse me, I appeared at age 11. At night time, in a procession of Our Lady, the Virgin Mary. I was the main trumpet player of the school band. I was playing the trumpet behind a statue of Our Lady that 4 schoolmates of mine were carrying. And we marched through town for a while, and then Our Lady appeared walking in front of me with 2 children, one for each hand. And I continued playing the trumpet behind her. I could only see her from her back. And the angel began telling me that my mother had consecrated me to the Virgin Mary in her womb. And Our Lady never abandoned me all the years I was away from God. And then he began telling me about the incredible power of the consecration to the Virgin Mary. And also the amazing gifts that Almighty Father has given to the Virgin Mary against Satan, and how important it is to be absolutely united with the Lady, because she is the queen of the battle. That's how the angel called her. And then he spoke about the rosary, and he showed me all of the rosaries in the procession. Since it was night time, I could only see the rosaries, I didn't see the people. And even the children had the rosaries. Some of the rosaries had a lot of light, and some of them had less light, and some of them had no light. Then he spoke about the prayer of the heart, and then something he called the economy of prayer. And this was a very long catechesis. We continue marching through town, and that procession was exorcising the town. Demons were flying away as we passed by. And it was incredible to see how the procession was cleaning up the town. And the angel was explaining to me how Satan has taken away processions from so many churches around the world and turning the church into a shy church. Then I appeared back in the lake, and the rock was filled with light. I knew that light was Jesus, so I knew I couldn't face the light because I was standing in the darkness of all my sins in that lake. So I turned down, I bent down towards the water, escaping the light, and from the corner of my eye I could see on the right side of the rock that Our Lady appeared again. This time she was facing me, and I was connected to her through an umbilical spiritual cord. And all my anguish, everything that I was going through her into Jesus. And this happened for a long time. An ecstasy takes place outside time, so I wouldn't be able to explain the length of that experience. Then this happened for a long time, and then the angel grabbed me from my neck and pulled my head up to face the light, and I couldn't bend my head anymore. I was blinded by the light, and after a while, I began to see the silhouette of Jesus in the light. He appeared gigantic, and rays of light were coming from his eyes towards me. As they touched me, I felt like I was going to be disintegrated, but it was his love, and light was coming out of his whole body towards me. And I don't know how long this lasted. I came off the ecstasies, and I spent 5.5 months more as a prisoner in the jungle after Jesus appeared to me. Every day I was asking the Lord not to let me die without confession, but I was sentenced to death. So I knew only a miracle could make that happen. But I knew that all those demons that I saw in the lake were still in my life, and that only the church, through confession, could free me from them. And the demons made sure they let me know that they were still with me. They made my time horrifying during those months of captivity. And 6 months to the date of my kidnapping, I have been tied up to a tree all day long. And it was nighttime, very dark. And 4 guerrillas with machine guns came and untied me and took me to a road. Once on the road, they told me to walk straight and not to look back. I was sure they were going to shoot me, but they just abandoned me there. I know that these guerrillas never knew why they let me go, because that night they were acting like hypnotized. I know it was the Holy Spirit who rescued me. No human being could have ever rescued me alive from that jungle. And I walked for a long time on the road in the darkness. And then a bus showed up and stopped a few meters ahead of me. I ran towards the bus. When the door opened, a woman came out, a guerrilla woman, and ran into the woods. So I yelled at the driver and told him that I had been just set free from a kidnapping to take me out of the jungle. And he laughed at me. Because I had my beard down to my chest, my clothes was all ripped. I looked like a skeleton because I lost all my weight. So they thought I'm just a crazy person in the woods. They didn't want me in the bus. When I realized they were not going to take me, I ran and jumped in the bus. And they couldn't possibly get me out of the bus. So they took me out of the jungle. And as soon as I made it back to my family and recovered a little, I went to confession to a Franciscan monastery. You probably imagine how long my confession was. And to me, coming out of the jungle was a big miracle, because it was. But the big miracle I was waiting for was confession. So when the priest gave me the absolution, I knew all those demons were gone. And I walked away from that monastery like floating in the air. It was the most incredible sense of freedom ever. And my new life began. I went back to Los Angeles, California, to my home, and spent 2 years learning how to be a Catholic again. During those 2 years, I didn't tell anyone about my experience with God, not even to the priest, to nobody. And I didn't know I had a mission. I thought God gave me another chance, and I had to change my ways, and that's what I was doing. But past those 2 years, I went back to Colombia during the Holy Week. And on Palm Sunday at noon Mass, in a big church in Bogota, I didn't make it in because it was packed with people. I was in the atrium, looking into the main door, and all I could see deep down inside was a big crucifix that was hanging from the top of the altar. And during the offertory of the Mass, while I was staring at the crucifix, I felt dizzy, as if I was fainting, but I was actually entering another ecstasy with Jesus. This time, Jesus didn't speak to me with a voice. He communicated exactly like my guardian angel to my heart. And he told me, I was 49 years old that day. He told me that the mission he created me for was just going to start. And he was going to take me all around the world. Every place I was going to go to, he had already chosen. Every person that was going to listen to me, he had already chosen by name. Everything I was going to share was infused in my heart in perfect harmony with Catholic teaching. And he was going to take care of me. I should not be afraid. I walked away from the church convinced that only a miracle could make that happen. But Jesus had performed a few miracles for me already. But I was completely broken as a person. I had no stamina, no enthusiasm. I had all kinds of fears. I was very hurt from the kidnapping. And my refuge was the church and prayer, but I was not well. But I remember the Franciscan priest where I went to confession when I came out of the kidnapping, and I went looking for him. And for the first time, I opened my heart to speak about my experiences with God. While I was sitting with him and telling him all of this, behind him on the wall there was a small crucifix. And Jesus manifested to me from there and told me that Franciscan had been chosen by him to be my spiritual father, that I should trust him and he will guide me. And that's the way it happened. He helped me. I walked away from my artistic career and I became a lay Catholic missionary 25 years ago. And the Lord has taken me to over 120 countries in all the continents. And this is what I do. I live of divine providence, and in 25 years, I have never lacked anything. I don't judge people for what I do. I write books. I've written like 13 books. And in my website, I have thousands of themes, mystical themes, that I have shared through the years in so many places in the church. Convents, religious orders of all kinds, pre-seminaries, parishes, congresses, all kinds of retreats. And this is what the Lord does. So to end, I can tell you this. I know and we know that this life is very short and very soon it's going to be over. The only important thing that we will take when we die is our holiness. There's nothing else that really matters. It's only saints enter heaven. But I know to be good, we need to be brave. Because you need to be brave to forgive. You need to be brave to have patience. You need to be brave to be compassionate. You need to be brave to have charity. Only the brave make it. Hell is filled with cowards. Amen. Amen.
You know, I just want to echo, I'm sure the thoughts of being here, to say, you know, what an amazing gift it is to have you here. For all of the similarities really that came up with your experience and the flame of love, some of the themes around the flame of love, the illumination of conscience, you know, a big one. And I really promise, of course, that you know, when we take the flame of love into our hearts, that we would see the effect within our own lives, within the lives of our family, and within the life of our community and the whole world. And in fact, that happens first and foremost through our own, what we see within our own self, which is a mini illumination of conscience, I think. But it certainly helps us to walk towards that road of holiness. And also I was struck by the terminology that we used, it was similar. So there was talk of an army, building up an army. And of course in the diary, Our Lady talks, and Jesus talks about building up an army. And of course the light that we see, you know, going to Our Lady's heart. And also I guess the pain that you talked about, if I understood it correctly, the pain that Our Lady felt. And pass that on to Jesus when we were in the lake. And it always strikes me with the flame of love, when the flame of love was first given to Elizabeth Kinderman on April the 13th, 1962, as I'm sure many of you here already know, that Elizabeth talked about the sobbing, the pain that Our Lady felt, and how important it was for Our Lady to go to the Father and beg for this additional grace of the flame of love, because so many of our children were falling into hell. And I think that throughout the themes of Marino's talk, but also the flame of love, through Fatima, through all of these apparitions of the Lady, the pain that the Lady feels for the sins that we're committing. And I think it's so uplifting that Our Lady and Jesus have bring us people like Marino to help us to understand how important it is for us to get back to the basics of love and kindness. So I just want to thank Marino on behalf of all of us, and we have another talk with Marino tomorrow, so we'll look forward to that. Thanks for